Good morning. My name is Bill Coons. I'm the Interim Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs here at UW-Tacoma, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the annual Urban Studies Forum. There is nothing more important for an urban-serving university, an anchor institution that we, UW-Tacoma, strives to be, than to facilitate discussions, to convene discussions about important topics. And there's nothing more important to our community than jobs and housing. So it is a great pleasure to welcome you here for this. I'd like to thank Dr. Modarres, the Urban Studies faculty and staff for making this happen. I was looking at the schedule last night and thinking about that idea of facilitation. It was great to see that each of the panels is facilitated by one of our faculty members. So I welcome you. I hope you have a productive and fruitful day. Thank you for being here. Dr. Modarres.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, Dr. Bill Coons, and thank you all for being here. It is great to be at a university where the university cares about the region. We are engaged. We want to be a part of the process of thinking and be a good stakeholder in this region and facilitate those conversations. I am the Director of Urban Studies Program, and the credit does not go to me. It goes to all the people who have helped put this together. So in due time, I will thank everyone. But I want to thank you first for coming today to join us for a very important conversation. The conversation is on a topic that is of importance to this region, and it will be for some time. This is our 6th annual Urban Forum, and the topics that we have chosen so far directly deal with various issues of this region. Before I start, I want to thank a few organizations for their support of this event. Pierce County Regional Council, Corsmo Construction, the Rush Companies, AHBL, BCRA, Business Examiner, Conversations Regarding Tacoma, Dwyer Pemberton and Colson, Exit 133, FLT Properties, Helix Design Group, Kidder Matthews, Master Builder Association of Pierce County, and Neil Water Company. Thank you for your generosity. You have enabled us to organize this event and have this conversation. I want to also thank the dedicated faculty members of Urban Studies Program who not only day in and day out engage with the topic of urban development and social issues that affects us, and in fact globally, but they also have been quite a mentor for me and helping me think about these sort of events and the issues that we need to talk about, so I thank them. I want to also thank our advisory board for being also a very important mentor to me and actually helping me with various elements of this region. I have been educated really well, I think, by them. So I thank you for that one, and thank you for all your help to also make this event possible. I want to thank Julia Smith from Urban Studies, who actually is the power behind all of this and helps a lot with all of our events. Also, Brianna, where are you? Brianna Bales, who actually, I don't think ever she goes home. She's always here and helping. So thank you so much, Brianna, for making this possible. I also want to thank, yes, thank you. One group that I need to also thank are the students who are outside and are helping. Our students are wonderful and we are proud of them, and they're very engaged not only with our small family of community and a community, but also community at large. So thank you all for your help. So we have chosen this topic based on what happened last year, which was we focused on beyond branding, urban branding, and one of the major issues that we talked about was the importance of leadership and at the same time inclusively created vision for a region, and economic development, jobs and housing are within the context of that visioning. This means that we all get to talk about it and we all get engaged with this topic in a fruitful way, in a way that we imagine the future of this region. And I want to emphasize the word region. From my perspective, there is no such a thing as a single city by itself. It is, in fact, a region that works together. We do not work for one neighborhood, one section, or one city, and everybody else stays out. In fact, for Pierce County, it is absolutely fundamental from my perspective that small cities, big cities, the county, they all work together in a way that we have a cohesive, synchronized way of thinking about jobs and housing. And today, what I encourage all of us to do is to think about a fundamental, very basic question. All day long, we should be thinking about what kind of jobs for what kind of housing, and what kind of housing for what kind of jobs. It is important for us, as I will talk a little bit in my little presentation, it is important for us to not conflate real estate development with economic development. They're two distinct things, and they have two different purposes. And as such, hopefully we understand that the relationship between those two and how they work out. It is important also to pay attention to who we are and where we have been. I like to invoke Reyner Banham, an author. I don't know if you know his work. He wrote a book called Los Angeles, The Architecture of Four Ecologies, and he uses a driving metaphor for us, for the way we think about planning, we think about region. And he says that when you move forward, you always look through the front of the car, but you always keep an eye on the rear view mirror, because it is important for you to know who you have left behind and who hasn't caught up yet and where you have been. And as such, it is important for us to pay attention to history, attention to where we are now, and then project onto the future. Our plans cannot be divorced from exactly who we are and how we are going to proceed. I'm going to do a little short presentation on a study I have been trying to do, and I won't say how long ago, but when I try to learn about the region, one of the things I do is I play with numbers. That's one of the things that I have been born to do, I guess. Numbers and graphs and maps are my way to look through this. And one of the things I want to actually point you to is that there's the result of it. Some of it I have written up into a report that you can find on our website, an Urban Studies program, under Community Resources. If you look for reports and publications, that's available. And for those of you who use iPad and iPhone, actually there's an app that will open it up to a single page so you can read it on your phone. So there's no excuse not to read it, and there will be a quiz at the end of the day. So you have just about 6 hours to read it. So go for it. With that, what I like to do is to give you a little bit of an overview of what this study entails. And I want to make sure you all understand I'm not criticizing the region. Essentially, I am trying to sort of present a number of ideas for us to sort of think about. Let me go through a couple of issues for us. One is that in the context of what we're going to be talking about is population. In fact, when I began to look at the historical patterns of population, something very interesting began to show up, and you will see my thesis by the time I finish with some of these slides. So we are looking at the 1970 to 2010 population growth pattern, and the blue line is that of the county, and the yellow line is that of the city. And you fundamentally see that the growth pattern for our region essentially has been one for the county and not for the city, and things will get a little bit interesting as we begin to look at percentages. In fact, if I look at the last 4 decades, the average growth rate for Tacoma averages out to about 0.5 percentage point, and annual average. And for the last portion, the last decade is actually only a 0.25 percentage point. But the 1980s, which is the numbers when the numbers went up, you notice that also the state was growing at that time. And I will make a proposition of what that means in due time. I have only a little bit of time to talk, so I'm just going to go through this rather quickly. So here is historical pattern. So if you want to go back, I can go back to 1890 and start from that point, the glorious years, right? And go through these numbers, and you will see this is what Seattle's looks like. So basically, between the two cities, the gap is substantial. However, it's not just us. It's not just Tacoma. It is also Everett, Spokane, and in a sense, what it really means is that there's really one city growing, one region growing, and that is Seattle. In terms of geographic distribution, all the red areas is where the growth has happened across the 4 decades. I will leave this to our first panel to discuss why the growth is fundamentally outside these urban cores over the last 4 decades. It is a stunning map to look at. And remember, these maps are not, I'm not inventing numbers. These are numbers, historical numbers. The one element of the growth that is substantially important, a part of my own research in various regions of the world, is the idea of aging. It's a global phenomenon. And in fact, for Pierce County, it is a fundamental important. Over the last 13 years or so, the median age of the county has gone up by about 2 years. And if you look at this map, this graph carefully, what you will notice that the population that is declining is actually the working age population with their children. It is the 35 to 44 with their children who are typically under 19. So essentially, yes, Pierce County and specifically Tacoma is a family-friendly place, better than perhaps regions around it, yet there is a canary in the mine singing, and I don't know why. So here it is. Between 1990 and 2010, the working age population has declined in proportion, but in terms of economic development, if this was a country, I would tell you this is a perfect stage for economic development because our working age to non-working age ratio is quite high, which means we have a window that we could work with. In terms of migration, and the only reason I'm putting these for you is just to have an overview of the region. In terms of migration, it is quite interesting. All the green areas are the areas that have moved to us. All the yellow, orange, and red areas are the places where people from Pierce County have gone to. I can explain some of these. Maricopa County in Phoenix, ASU and retirement. I can look at basically Thurston and Mason. They're next to us. I can see sort of wanting to live outside the areas of the hub and, the urban areas. But here are a couple of things that sort of is interesting. Colorado, again, major university cluster. This one, I don't know how many of you know where that is. This is actually Washington County in Utah, and this is where the city of St. George is located, this beautiful city, if you have never been to it, just red rocks everywhere. And it's close to Zion National Park and all that. All of that said and done, I have no idea why people are moving to Washington County in Utah. The growth actually is among the Latino population, is substantial, is a 33-fold growth since 1970. 11% of the growth since the 2010 has been among the Latino population, followed by the Asian population. So in fact, when we look at the growth pattern, is growth within diversity category. State of Washington has gained substantially in Latino population, and you can see the blue line. So the region really matches that of the entirety of the state in that regard. But what is interesting about this region, which is uniquely different from other places, that the majority of the Latino population are native-born. They are not immigrants. 2/3 actually are native-born, which means that essentially having a legislation that says we need to teach English as a second language may not be really what is the aim of economic development. Now, there are a couple of things that I need to show you in terms of a map. So I'm going to see if I can get these maps for you. So the median age structure of the region, and for your orientation, that's Tacoma, Seattle, and this is the Pierce County line. Majority of the older age neighborhoods are along the coastal areas, and in the western part of our fair city, the median age is over 45, meaning that now we have regions that are quite getting what I call them experienced workers. So if you want to think of it that way, they're seasoned workforces that we can rely on, perhaps. Is that a good interpretation? All right, I just wanted to make sure. You see, that this map is a suggestion, and you probably will hear from our keynote today, that this is an interesting map because what it does is shows us that, in fact, majority of the growth since 1970, if it has been in the county area, what we would call suburbs, is where the children are. The children seem to be largely absent from Seattle and, of course, Port area. We would not expect that. But notice that our downtown area does not have a large percentage of children. In terms of diversity, this region is stunning. In fact, only I-5 corridor shows up as diverse area. So majority of the folks that we have, they have geographically confined to specific areas, and I will leave it up to you to tell me why this has happened, right? But what is important here is that it also coincides with the income structure. And starting with this slide, I want to make sure you see where the money is. There's one other indicator that's quite important. This is the level of the education of the workforce practically is 25 plus with BA, 25 plus with MA or graduate degree. They're all up in Bellevue from Renton and that section of the 405 all the way towards Seattle. It seems like the South Sound has missed on that one, but we have an interesting phenomenon happening now, which is now we have more people enrolled in grad school and school in this region. I don't have time to explain that one, but this is what we call a learning region, a region that can come around and modify its own structure. All right, now, a little bit of a depressing news. So this is the unemployment rate across the period of 1990 to December of 2014, which is only a couple of months ago. We have historically followed that pattern of Seattle, which means it's the national pattern, except for the period of the recession, where we actually had come together in terms of our unemployment rate. But something very odd has happened since the return, and that is the unemployment rate in Seattle region, the Seattle MD, Metropolitan District, is actually declining, and as of December 2014, we actually went to 7% or 2.5 percentage points above that of the Seattle MD, which essentially suggests that there is some anomaly in the historical pattern is beginning to happen with unemployment. It is time that we get ahead of it and take care of it. In terms of wage structure, and I'm sorry, most of you know that our program is about social justice, so now you're going to see that part of it. In terms of wage structure, in almost every occupational category, wages are lower in Tacoma except for farming, fishing, and forestry and protective services. We do okay in transportation and construction and various installation and production. But here is what the sort of fundamentals are. Overall, Tacoma MD does not offer a wage structure that could be called attractive to highly skilled labor force. In computer and mathematical occupations, mean hourly wages in Tacoma metropolitan districts are 8% below the national level, when Seattle is 25% above the national level. Comparatively speaking, San Francisco, San Mateo, Redwood City Metropolitan District is 27% above, but one thing about that region is that in every category, they're above the national level, and significantly. In fact, if we put all the wages together and compare these metropolitan districts, in the Seattle MD, the similar figure stands at 27% above the national level. Tacoma is the national level. We do not exceed the national level significantly. In terms of firms, we have 18% share of all the firms in the 4 counties I'm looking at, and I know you are used to having Kitsap included, but in my mind, I connect Thurston, so excuse me for that sort of modifying geography on you, but that's how I'm going to work with that number. So 18% of the share is Pierce County, whereas our employment is only 12% of that share. So King County has about 2/3 of the share of the employment, which essentially means we have small companies. This is how it works out. Now, there will be a quiz on this slide. So let me explain to you what this slide is saying. It's in the report. You can spend time with it. Remember, by 3 o'clock, there will be a quiz. So if you notice, what happens is that we maintain our regional share fairly well up to the size of 100 to 249 employees. After that, we decline in share. Essentially means that we have smaller companies in this region compared to other areas. In fact, that should not be a problem because Seattle and Kirkland, I'm going to compare cities, have significant number of large proportion of their employees or employers have 1 to 4 employees, and we have less, and those 2 cities, as you know, they do really well. Notice that in the 5 to 9, we seem to be really excelling. That's about the category of employment size. That's quite important. Job sectors by employment. This is King County's 35% services. It has 27% retail and about 10% in finance, insurance, and real estate, which we call the fire sector. Our share is significantly more in the services. However, when we look at, and this is Snohomish, which is pretty much like us, but notice what happens with the Snohomish and us, because there's a little clue as what's going to happen next. So in construction, King County is 4%, we are 10%, the Snohomish is 11%, larger than King County. And there's a reason they don't worry about it. And there's a King County share of revenue. Notice despite the smaller share of service, we tend to sort of have an issue with that. We have the same amount of revenue from services, having more of our economy dedicated to that sector than does King County, which essentially points to the same issue of wages. Wages seem to be low. Now, lots of information, it's just like a brain dump. So let me show you what that looks like. So this is employment density, and these are major employment centers, and UW itself is a major employer with all the employees around them, and all the green ones that you're looking at is 100 or more employees. So you can see the location of these companies, and essentially what you see is a large blob of economy right here. Between Redmond, Bellevue, and Kirkland, there's another cluster. We see gradually in the SeaTac area, a little bit in the Tuckville area, as you go south, there's only a little cluster here in Auburn, and this is where Weyerhaeuser would be. And if Weyerhaeuser leaves by next year, this will disappear. Not if, when they leave. So here is also ours, which is essentially that of university and the two hospitals. So we have a sort of a structure into the region's economy, but majority are up here. I'm going to show you two sectors. We have no time. I'm almost like 5 minutes away from being done, and I'm there almost. So if we look at just the 6 sectors within tech industries, telecommunication, data processing, computer system design, scientific research, computer and electronics, electronic equipment, here is our share. So the 6 counties, when I exclude Microsoft and Boeing, because I don't want to skew the percentages, there are 7,000 or so companies, over 65,000 employees among them. Look at the share of King County and compare it against us. 2/3 of all the firms, 80% of the employees, and nearly 90% of the revenue, and 70% of office spaces. Our share is 10.7, 3.4, 1.7, and 8.2. In fact, this pattern sort of continues, right? So we don't seem to be attracting a lot of R&D, and we are not really catching up in that category. I could look at other sectors too. Biotechnology is another one. We don't have it in R&D. When we look at the biotechnologies in terms of non-R&D or production, out of the 3,000 plus employees in the region, we have only 61 of them. So here is what I am going to actually propose. What we really have is not a state economy, it's not a regional economy, it's a West King County economy. That in fact, what has happened is that this is a separate state of its own. Majority of the state has invested in a small area, and entire employment is in one area, which essentially means that it poses a problem. We do have a role to play in Snohomish County and in Pierce County, and that's called housing. And if you look at what we build, is primarily the biggest portion of our construction is in single-family residential units, and I'm just looking at residential units and permits. And in fact, that means that there is a consequence for what we do. The consequence is this. The same area that has the highest level of income, the highest number of companies, highest level of revenues, does not have affordable housing. What it does have is two counties next to it that can actually provide it with this. If you look at the red areas, these are all the areas in which the residents of those regions actually have said they do not work in their county of residence. The line of Snohomish County and Pierce County is stunning. I would not expect such a sharp line, which means we have really a role that, if we do assume that role, is actually in real estate development and specific kind of development. Minus the public transportation, this will be dangerous for the future. In other words, it will be not sustainable in that sense. So in a way, there's a question to be asked. If we are going that route, how do we sort of work with that one? Let me conclude by saying this, and my students have heard me sometimes talk about this. There are 2 ways an economy can go. An economy can go for capital deepening, which means you invest in R&D, which means money makes money, which makes money, and so on and so forth. Or you engage with something what the Xerox CEO one time said. There are industries in which you take innovation and you turn it into everyday objects and instruments. Think of a cell phone. Cell phone is a part of our lives. It is a technology, it's advanced technology, but we don't think of it that way. For that, you have production. So production facilities, management, services of that element of the everydayness of technology. So if those 2 lead to each other, a region like ours needs to think about 2 other issues. For R&D, we need educational equity. We need to fundamentally think about access to education, building our own workforce, and building a new economy for ourselves. If we want to continue along the line of capital widening, then I would suggest that labor equity is one issue that we want to think about. Remember that if people cannot buy what they make, the economy will not grow. Thank you so much. I will ask the panel to come up for the first presentation.